ready to rock and roll with some college football playoffs. There are 4 left. I mean, we got to go over the quarterfinals first, but there are 4 left. And man, 3 games in the college football season. Time has flown by. It sounds like here we were in August, right? And we were so pumped about the season starting. And now it's just, we're here. We are right here and ready to rock and roll for the college football playoff and get ready for the semifinals, the national championship. But like I said before that, we're going to recap it. And guess who we have here with us? We have our very own reoccurring correspondent, Trent Ritchie, back with us. And we're going to discuss the college football playoff quarterfinals and some 2 coaching hires that, 1, I forgot to get to, and number 2, that just happened yesterday. So, guys, welcome to Pigskin Frenzy on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joel Norris, and whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, Podbean, or Apple, a big thank you for taking some time out of your Tuesday to just sit back, watch, and listen to some college football coverage presented by us. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like the episode, leave comments down below. Spotify, Podbean, and Apple, all you got to do is just share around with others and follow on there as well. X and Instagram is at Pigskin_Frenzy, and the website is www.pigskinfrenzy.weebly.com. Guys, we have 61,000 channel views on YouTube. We have about to be at 6,400 listeners across all audio platforms. A big thank you for tuning in each and every Tuesday and Thursday. And not only that, we give our Lord and Savior Jesus the praise. And not only that, because we're doing this because of him. Without him, we would not be doing this. And we give him all the praise just for doing Pigskin Frenzy and being in college football media. Ladies and gentlemen, our very special correspondent is back with us. He is out in Arizona, I believe. It's probably warm, I guarantee you, because I'm wearing a hoodie out in Illinois, and it's very freezing. I know you're wearing a short sleeve shirt. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, Trent Ritchie. Golf clap, ladies and gentlemen, for Trent Ritchie. Man, what's going on? How are you doing?
Me. Thank you, man. How you doing?
Dude, ready to talk about some of these playoff games and recap the quarterfinals. But, man, before we just start, what's it like living in Arizona in the winter? I want to know that.
Oh, I mean, it gets, I'm out of Tucson, so it's pretty even-handed till sort of end of January, and then, you kind of start to feel the heat kick back up again with spring, but those summers are what scare people away. You're looking at, over 100 degrees on average. It's pretty tough. You can't even wear jeans outside, nothing. You got to dress like you just came back from the gym everywhere you go. So it's got its gives and takes, but you know what? I like it quite a bit. It's great.
Hey, and then that's good. At least here it's not, or at least there at least it's not like 35 degrees or even worse. Probably about a nice crisp 17, because here it's like that until April. So here in Illinois we got to get used to it, man. But the college football playoff quarterfinal, man, was electric.
Yep.
I mean, there's no other way to put it. It was electric. Good matchups, at least for, some. I mean, 2 games were great. 2 games ended up being blowouts, but still electric because of the star power on paper, right, with the team. So we're going to kick one off that was great. And by the way, I picked all these games with Stuart Mandel. Go back and watch that last episode on last Tuesday. I was 1-4. I mean, or 1-3, I believe. Sorry, 1-3, I believe. Excuse me. I'd be 0-4 if I got the, the Indiana one wrong. But 1-3, and we're going to kick off the 3 games that we got wrong. Let's just go right ahead and just go all the games that we got wrong. Kick it off with the Sugar Bowl, because that was, to me, probably the most shocking game out of all of them. Georgia and Ole Miss. And plus, they made me eat my words. I mean, final score of this game was 39-34. Ole Miss defeated Georgia. I got it wrong. I said Georgia was going to beat them by 10. They made me eat my words. They spot the ball, as they called it, down in Oxford, and they played some football. And they ended up beating Georgia. The game was great overall. I'm going to get to a little bit on Georgia in a little bit, but Trent, what's your thoughts on Ole Miss in this game? They look like they're ready to rock and roll in the Fiesta Bowl. That's all I got to say.
And you know what? Anything not characterized as electric when it comes to Ole Miss would be an understatement. They played their hearts out. They left everything they had on the field, especially with the recent loss of Lane Kiffin. I think there's a lot of turmoil going on within that program, especially hearing about how they could be losing even more assistants coming up for their game against Miami. I think that's a big deal, especially considering that their offense really carried them through this one. I think Ole Miss's defense had some key stops, but ultimately you're looking at Trinidad Chambliss, 30 of 46 and 2 touchdowns. You're looking at Wallace the third with 156 yards and a touchdown to grab. It was great football. I mean, there were plays where, I mean, it was Houdini. You didn't understand how is he getting the ball out. There was that pitch play down the side to Lacey that ended up being, I believe, a 15 or 10 yard first down. And that was, I mean, he looked like he was pretty much trapped back there. And you really got to give credit to Georgia's defense on that front, especially the front four. I think they really played the best they could. But ultimately, getting to your point about Georgia, I think they were really on the field for a long time. And I think that is something that definitely needs to be discussed going forward about Georgia, especially when it applies to this game in the Sugar Bowl.
Oh, 100%, man. Trinidad Chambliss, dude, made some electrifying plays. Like when he was scrambling and then all of a sudden cross body just throw down the field, first down, led him to another score. It was amazing, dude. I mean, that performance was just great. And a lot of people are going to kind of underestimate him a little bit, especially coming up against Miami. Again, I'm not picking that game yet. I mean, you can pick the game here in a little bit. I'll probably ask you about it, but I can't pick it until Thursday. But Miami, that's going to be a tough game, but Trinidad Chambliss can shock some people in that game. Who knows? Trinidad Chambliss looked really good against Georgia. Like I said, or like you said, 362 yards, 30-46, 2 touchdowns in this ball game. I mean, he looked like he was in command of that offense. But let's not count out that defense. The defense played really physical as well. I think that the defense kind of, and this is a positive circle moment for me, I guess. We can click the pin here, circle it down. I think the defense looked kind of physical in this game. They played Georgia, obviously, you're going to move the ball on Ole Miss. I'm not saying that as a knock to Ole Miss, but a lot of people have moved the ball on Ole Miss. But there's one thing that they have, and that's their advantage, and that's their physicality on defense. They do have some sort of physicality on their defense, and they played like it against Georgia, especially against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl this past Thursday on New Year's. So, and I will say this, Wallace the third, 156 yards at receiver. He was a positive circle moment for me as well. He looked, he was their main go-to. Trinidad Chambliss was his main go-to. He looked good catching the ball. He looked good in his route running. Everything was good. I mean, Ole Miss's offense was electrifying. I can mention this on Thursday too, but it's sort of a look ahead. I'm very curious to see who's going to be there come this Thursday when it comes to, Miami and the Fiesta Bowl. I'm very curious to see who's going to coach. I know Charlie Weiss is going to coach, so that's a pretty big deal. But who else is going to be there? That's a big concern for me as well. So, I mean, obviously, 39-34 is final score. Not a lot of negatives. I mean, for when it comes to Ole Miss, I mean, I can look at some stats, but there's not really a lot of things I can, think of. I mean, the turnover is a concern. I mean, I know it's only one turnover, but every turnover can count against a Miami team, so you got to clean that up ahead of Miami. But other than that, this may be a team that Miami may not want to face. Maybe. Who knows? We'll see. We'll see what happens. But this may be a team that Miami may not want to face. Maybe I'm on the Ole Miss hype train now. They made me eat my words. Like I said, I got it wrong, and now I'm all on board. And I said it beforehand. I said it before the playoffs started. If they go to the playoffs, make a deep run, and they win the national championship, I think that would be a great story. Honestly, it would be a great story. But we're going to find that out here in a little bit. 5 for 14 on third down. They look good there. 473 total yards. Obviously, they look good there. Turnovers with the fumble, clean that up, right? But I think they look good overall. 4.1 yards per rush, not too bad. I think the running game probably needs to get going a little bit more. I mean, I know 98 yards, 2 touchdowns, 22 carries. They did their best. It's going to be a little bit difficult against Miami's defense, but sure. I want to see if Keywan Lacey can break out even more and become the big factor in against Miami. I know it's tough. Their rushing defense is good, but we will see what happens there. Let's go on to Georgia really quick. Georgia, to me, and a lot of people are going to say, oh, Georgia played, they played horrible in this game. And look, I don't think they played overall just terrible. I mean, they outscored Ole Miss 21-6 on my notes here in the second quarter. They didn't play bad. I will just say some key decision making and some drives that were a little bit stalled, if that makes sense. Like, not really stalled, but like some just conservative play calling. Let me just put it that way. Conservative play calling. And that's what I said on my bedtime college football talk videos. Happened, right? I think that's what happened in this game, and that's what cost them, right? So I think some positive circle moments, obviously, was Gunnar Stockton, the way he carried the ball, ran the ball, played with some toughness and physicality. I think he was honestly one of their bright spots in this game. Honestly, I mean, Zachariah Branch was too, but Gunnar Stockton and the way he moved the ball and carried the ball, positive circle moment for him, and it was him. I think that they look good physically up front. I think that's a positive circle moment as well. Negatives, I guess, to me, were decision making. I think mentally and just coaching was a negative to me. I think the play calling could have been a lot better. I think the decisions could have been a lot better, and I think that's what really ultimately cost them in this game. But Trent, what do you think about Georgia, and what would you like to see from them heading into 2026 as well?
So when it comes to some of your negative circle moments, especially around coaching, I think that was the area that really stuck out to me. It seemed to me that in the past, Kirby Smart has really had a concise plan for how he was going to go in and handle a lot of these high-level programs. You look back at his win versus Michigan, you look back at the really awful game of playing TCU in the national championship. You even look back at his game versus Nick Saban at Bama. You see an identity there. I feel like his identity with this game was he was almost scared to lose and didn't want to win enough. It felt as though he was running away from the loss, not running toward the win. And when I say that because of, you're 3 for 13 on third down. That is really inexcusable, especially for a program that leans heavily on your defensive front and your linebackers. I think you see a lot of areas of improvement there. I think that fourth down on your own 35-yard line is really questionable, to say the least. I think you've got a lot of, answers to give there in terms of what the identity was on that. I think they were really, for a lot of the game, playing very conservative and leaning on the defense. And it's almost like when he started to feel Trinidad Chambliss and that offense sort of nipping at the heels, he changed the way he was calling the game totally, thinking that, maybe this is me being gutsy and this is me finishing it off and really getting in there and winning this game. But it appeared almost incompetent. It appeared like, okay, I don't see why you would do that. You're spotting them a free touchdown if they don't get this. Offense was never your identity this whole year. Even, in big wins like Texas, you noticed it was the suffocating defense. It was them giving, Arch Manning and even Quinn Ewers in the SEC championship of the past trouble and really being able to solidify that defensive identity. I think not having that this game and also letting Trinidad Chambliss really go to work on a defense that looked incredibly tired was a bad look for Kirby.
100%, man. And then good analysis there, really. I think that, like you said, 3 for 13 isn't excusable. I mean, that's especially when a team is really good at third down conversions. I mean, they did good on time of possession, but I think Ole Miss, honestly, defensively, kind of limited their possessions. Right? Yeah. I think that was one of the keys for me when I was talking with Stuart Mandel last week. That was one of the keys for me. I think they had to get them off the field as much as they could, and I think Ole Miss did that. I think Ole Miss did that to the best that they could, and I think that's a very good reason why they won the game as well. What I want to see this, and I think there have been moments, and this is I'm going to do my spring outlooks like we do in March and in May, and I think, spoiler alert on this, I already said Alabama was going to be one. Spoiler alert, Georgia will also be one. What I want to see in the spring from Georgia is I want to see if they can update the play calling and be more aggressive. I want to see if they can be more aggressive. I want to see Georgia aggressive again. I think that they have gotten, I think in some games, and they've won. Don't get me wrong, they have won. I want to see if they're going to be a little bit more conservative or less conservative, if that makes sense. They've been kind of conservative in some of their games that they've won, play calling wise. I want to see how aggressive they can be. That's it. I just want to see how aggressive they can be. That's the one big thing I want to see from them in 2026. I know Gunnar Stockton will be back, and I know that they'll have some guys. I know Branch is going to the NFL, but they'll have some guys on their team. I just want to see if they can dial it up and be a little bit more aggressive. That's it. That's all I got from Georgia. Final score of this game was 39-34. Ole Miss made me eat my words, man. They have a game in the Fiesta Bowl coming up on Thursday, and we're going to talk about their opponent right now, actually. So 39-34, they win the Sugar Bowl, and they are on their way to the semifinal against, well, the team that we're talking about right now in the Fiesta Bowl, but we're talking about the Cotton Bowl. Miami, Ohio State. Picked up Ohio State to win this game. I said Miami was going to cover. I think that we could all agree with that. It wasn't going to be like some blowout type game, right, from Ohio State. Well, to me, at least in the first half, it was a blowout, and it was not in the favor of Ohio State. Ohio State started coming back and started pushing a little bit harder, but then Miami just would not let up. Final score of this ball game, Miami, I believe it was 24-14. Miami gets the win over Ohio State. Man, I was surprised by this one. I wasn't surprised with the Ole Miss one. Not like the Ole Miss one was the most shocking one to me, but I was a little bit stunned on how Miami kind of treated Ohio State in that game. And they did treat them with a little bit more physicality. They treated them like, okay, that we're kind of the bullies right now at the playground. We're knocking y'all off, right? This is our playground now. I think that's how Miami kind of acted in this game. Miami looked really good, man. I think the number one thing they looked good on was defensively. They looked good, really good defensively. Mesidor had 2 sacks. Bain was getting to Julian Sayin. I think the one big key thing and positive circle moment for me for Miami was their defense and how they pressured Julian Sayin. I think they had to pressure Julian Sayin to win this game, and they did that. That was a big key for me, and control the line of scrimmage. Positive circle moment for me was as well. Carson Beck looked okay. I'm not going to say he looked fantastic. I think the defense looked really good in this game and got them the win. That pick six, they just jumped it and then took it to the house, right? So defensively to me was the big positive circle moment, and the physicality was the positive circle moment for Miami. I think the negative for me for Miami a little bit, I do think the running game, 90 yards, I get it with Fletcher, 19 carries. I think they can try to run the ball a little bit better. Yes. Carson Beck, he looked okay, but I think we need to have a Carson Beck of where he can, especially against this Ole Miss offense coming up, I think that he needs to break out even more. Show that 2023 Georgia Carson Beck. That's what we want to see from him against Ole Miss. I think those are the negatives a little bit, but not too much of a negative, just a tiny bit. The main positive was the defense, though, man. That defense was physical, and especially not only on defense, the line of scrimmage. They were winning in the trenches on both sides of the ball. So I'll start with you, or I'll go with you in Miami now. What was your thoughts on Miami? How they looked, and not only that. I'm just gonna go out flat out say it. Who you got in the Fiesta Bowl? Because I want to know your thoughts on that one as well.
Okay, so when it comes to this game, I think there were definitely a lot more notes on Ohio State on my end. That being an obvious one. They went in, being the heavy favorite, being the number 2 seed in the nation. I think you see that and you expect a win, especially after the close call that was Indiana. I think that was quite embarrassing for them as a program. They were really looking to go in there and make a statement win versus Indiana and really call into question their undefeated season, and it was quite the reverse. However, I think when it comes to Miami, the thing that I really saw that differentiated them from Ohio State was the line play on both sides of the ball. I think you look at, Mark Fletcher Jr. He was great that game, catches that wheel route touchdown at the end or at the beginning of I believe the first quarter. But you look at that and you're even still like, okay, but you see the blown line play from Ohio State on that left tackle. He really got the edge there. He was really able to set up, get his block in, and you had an open Fletcher in the end zone at that point. I think Carson Beck played relatively conservative. I think you look at the time he was getting in the pocket, and you don't expect that from Ohio State. You expect Ohio State to be really, rushing on all cylinders. They've got a great secondary with Caleb Downs. I think he played really well also, and I think that would be a big highlight point for me on Ohio State. But looking at Miami itself, I think the real differentiation was that defensive line. I think it freed up a lot of their secondary on the defense. I think in terms of the offense, it allowed Carson Beck to play really conservative and to lean heavy on the run, which is really, I think, them cripping off of Georgia's play sheet. I think they really saw that that was what worked for Carson Beck at Georgia. That was what allowed them to limit the turnovers like we see in Louisville and limit the big turnover play at the end of the SMU game. I think that right there was the big difference maker. And maybe as a final note to tie into it, Reuben Bay Jr. is NFL ready, and everybody knows it. I'm excited to see him play. I'm excited to see what team he lands, and I expect him to be a top 5 pick.
Oh, 100%. Akeem Mesidor as well. I mean, those edge rushers they can give Trinidad Chambliss some fits. So we got to watch out for that in the Fiesta Bowl. Who do you have in the Fiesta Bowl?
So I do have Ole Miss. I think they have a certain level of fire to them that I don't think people are really expecting. I think a lot of it has to do with the turmoil with Lane Kiffin. I think that team is really developing an identity of hard-nosed football, especially this year. I think they see this as the last hurrah of this program, the last hurrah of this team, because you don't know that Keith Golding is going to have the same success next year. You don't know that you're returning Trinidad Chambliss as much as they would like to, and I have a feeling he will be able to come back for that final 6th year. I think you're going to have a lot of different pieces at play. I think you could see Kawan Lacey flipping to LSU. I think you could see, Wallace leaving at some point soon. I think you see a lot of these areas where there may be different pieces in play. And once you're in, especially in a 12-team playoff, you're never going to have a shot like this again. You had a free game against Tulane that, I mean, you couldn't ask for better practice than that. You couldn't ask for a better soft run against a team like Georgia than that. You really got an opportunity here that you cannot squander. And I think Keith Golding is coaching that way. Keith Golding knows that internally. And I think even with the possible losses of assistant coaches, like your running backs coach, although I did hear he was back at practice this week, which is great. But I think seeing that you may really be in a rut without some of these coaches, I think they are really, really going full throttle here and really making an effort to make sure that this run is capitalized on, regardless of having Kiffin there or not.
Oh, 100%, man. Well played, and well said. Man, Ohio State, and then we'll move on to the other game, because I know you talked about Ohio State just a minute ago. I agree with you. I think Caleb Downs, to me, is one of the best players, if not the best defensive player in college football, at least. I mean, he's amazing, dude. I mean, him and Ruben Bain are up there for me. Dude, he's a top 5 pick. He played his hardest in this game, and I think Ohio State's defense played their hardest, at least in the second half in this game as well. I just think that overall, and the thing is, look, I'll say positive circle moment, they fought. They showed some fight. Especially in the second half, they showed some fight. I think that's a positive circle moment for me. They ran the ball well in the second half. I mean, I know Jackson had 55 yards, 11 carries, 1 touchdown. I get it. I think it's a positive circle moment. Jeremiah Smith obviously is a positive circle moment. I mean, he's the best receiver in next year's draft. I mean, 157 yards, 7 receptions, 1 touchdown. He's in the. I always say when you see Jeremiah Smith run, he's a monster, as he is a monster, man. He's an animal. And he played really good in this game as well. I think the negatives obviously were you got out physicaled. Julian Sayin didn't have his best game, obviously, because he was getting pressured and he was, getting rushed by Bain and Mesidor. I think overall the numbers don't stand out. I mean, 287 yards, okay, 22 for 35. It's like overall he had a good year. He just played a really good Miami defense. I think they'll be back. I think Ohio State's not going anywhere. I think Julian Sayin has a shot at really. And I'm going to say this. I mean, I'm not going to say it right. It's not a prediction or anything like that. I may can say it as a prediction. I think he'll be back in New York next year. In December of 2026. I think he'll be back in New York, I believe. I mean, I think Julian's saying, but due to the scheduling, not only that, due to the team that he's on, I think he's got a really good shot at making it back. So we'll see what happens with Ohio State. What I want to see, honestly, is offensive coordinator Who's that going to be in the spring? I want to see that, and I want to see the play calling. I want to see how it was. I think the play call. I know Ryan Day's a good play caller when and he used to be a really good play caller. I think he has kind of gotten out of that role, and I think he was a little bit of a thrown off in this ball game. I think Brian Hartline probably should have called the plays in this game. I think that's probably everyone's going to be like, dude, what difference does it make? Makes a huge difference. All right, it makes a huge difference. I mean, I get it. He's going to be the USF head coach. He was there and he was working with the receivers, but he didn't call the plays. I still would have let him call the plays. I think he would have been maybe not a different outcome. It could have been maybe a different, maybe a different score, and the offense maybe the offense may have looked a little bit better. Maybe. That's just my honest thoughts on Ohio State. But everyone, y'all can leave it in the comments and take it as you will. All right. So 24-14 was the final score. Miami is playing Ole Miss in the Fiesta Bowl on Thursday. And now we move on to the 2 games for the Peach Bowl. As we get ready for the Peach Bowl on Friday. Man, Oregon and Texas Tech was something. I mean, I said, you know what, Joel? Look, we're going to go with Texas Tech, right? Wreck them. Guns up. We're going to go with Texas Tech. Everything's going to be great. Down in Miami, they're going to play hard because their defense is good, and they have an elite defense. Don't get me wrong. It's just their offense was still back in Lubbock, apparently. Final score of this game was 23-0. Oregon beats Texas Tech. Wow. I mean, that was all I got to say is wow. Oregon is talented. Don't get me wrong. And I said that with Stuart Mandel. Oregon is very talented. Very good football team. Dante Moore, good quarterback, positive circle moment. He looked good. I think the negatives for Oregon, they shot themselves in the foot on a lot of drives, and they can't do that on Friday. I think that they look good physically on both sides of the ball. They weren't one-dimensional. I think they had a little bit of a better offense. They didn't look perfect, but they had a little bit of a better offense than Texas Tech. They didn't look one-dimensional. That's a positive for them, and that's how they got the win. They ran the ball well. I think that there weren't any. I think playing a clean game at first was good for them until then the second half happened and Texas Tech started committing a lot of penalties. That's a whole other conversation. But Oregon looked like they outmatched them later in the game. As the game kind of went on, I said on X, I don't know how long this defense is going to hold up against this team because they're good, but their offense ain't helping them out. Everybody has a gas tank. When you jog at the gym and when you go to the gym, you burn off the calories, the fat, you burn it all off, and you're like, okay, I'm feeling great. And then after that 30 minutes kick in, you're like, man, I'm kind of wore out, right? I kind of want to go home and get rest a little bit. That is how it happened with Texas Tech. You're tired. I mean, you're gonna get your energy tank, your tanks, you're gonna run out. So that's what happened with their defense. Oregon had the better of both, and I think that's what happened in this game. Trent, what's your thoughts on Oregon? And we'll go from there with Texas Tech.
So when it comes to Oregon, I think first off, they own time of possession, 38 minutes to 22 minutes for Texas Tech. I think that's obviously a big point going forward. Oregon struggled on third down, 4 of 19 and 4 of 8 on fourth. So they really were not moving the ball, and I think quite the way that I expected. I think that is all the credit in the world to Texas Tech's defense and Jacob Rodriguez. I think that really showed that they showed up to play regardless of what happened on the other side of the ball. I see Dante Moore's processing as still being a little bit behind. I think there's something there to, you've got this team on the ropes. You've got them by the throat, and you're ready to go ahead and win this game. And it didn't seem like until the very end they were ever able to truly separate. It still felt like a game. It still felt like Texas Tech, if they just got that offense going, could be in it very easily. And I think that with a quarterback performance like you got out of Baron Morton, that really needs to be exposed and taken advantage of if you're Oregon. And I didn't see that. I think the defense played really, really well, but I think the offense, I see issues coming up against Indiana. They play very, very conservative. It feels like Dan Lanning is trying to highlight Dante Moore as much as he can. I think his mobility was a big deal. I think his ability to see downfield is, by and large, really NFL level. I think that I still see some areas when it comes to precision, I still see some areas when it comes to like his power behind the ball. I think there's still some things that I look at and I say that, you know what, he still looks to me not like one of the Oregon great quarterbacks, but he looks like a product of Dan Lanning in Oregon, and I think that that is something NFL teams are going to look at going forward.
100%, man. I think Dante Moore, I've kind of made it known on this, and I don't know. Well, I think I've made it known, or at least around my circle, right, and friends, and with you. I mean, we're friends now, so like, I made it known around with you. I think Dante Moore should stay.
Yep.
I mean, if anybody, if I haven't told my friends that, and y'all are now listening to my show, I think he should stay. I mean, honestly, and this is not like a knock at Dante Moore. I think he's a phenomenal quarterback. I really do. He's a really good quarterback.
Yes.
I just think that if he stays another year, not only does he have a chance to do great things, he has a chance to win the Heisman Trophy. He has a chance to do, a lot. Like, he has a chance to try to lead this team to a Big Ten title. He has a chance to do a lot with Oregon next year. And not only that, improve the draft stock and improve and develop a little bit more in areas to where NFL scouts are like, oh man, he's the bona fide undisputed number one pick. And a lot of people are saying that about him now. There's a lot of guys who are high on him. I'm not saying that. But what I do think is, I'm with you. I think timing and decision making is a little bit of a thing he needs to work on. And like you said, a little bit of a processing kind of deal. Like, okay, he's trying to process. He's looking. His eyes are somewhere else when their eyes need to be there, kind of deal, right? So, all that to say is, I do think he should stay. That's my honest thoughts on that. I think Oregon is a really good team. I think Oregon is getting closer and closer. And a lot of people are going to say, well, what do you mean by that? What I mean by that is, as they build and build and build under Dan Lanning, because Dan Lanning's my dude. I love Dan Lanning. They are getting closer to a national title. They may not win it this year, but they're getting there. They're getting there. They were at the quarterfinals. They lost. Now they made it past the quarterfinals. They're in the semifinal. What's after the semifinal? You know what I'm saying? It's the national championship. They're getting closer. And they've been to the national championship twice before. With 2010 season, 2015 season, I believe. I think it was 2014 season. I believe it was a 2014 season. Right. I believe they made it to the national title. So they hadn't been since then, the 2014 season, but they're getting there. They're getting close under Dan Lanning. Watch out, man. And it could happen on Friday. Who knows? Knowing Dan Lanning with the rematches, I get who they're facing, but let's not tread lightly on Dan Lanning. Not yet. I'm not a spoiler. I'm not saying I'm picking anybody yet. I'm just saying let's be careful. I got to go in this game on Friday being careful, like, okay, I'm in for the possibility of Dan Lanning, doing what he normally does, eyes all big and pumped up and crashing out and getting ready for, to lead Oregon Ducks to a win and go to a title. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But that's Oregon's side. Those are my positive circle moments for them. Let's talk about Texas Tech and let's break them down. And then we'll move on to the Rose Bowl and then we'll get your predictions on everything. Texas Tech, man, great defense. I cannot write that home enough and say that to the cows go home enough. Jacob Rodriguez, Ben Roberts, all those guys, phenomenal. Dude, great. Bailey on the line, great. They were all good. Look, man, you can only do so much. Literally, you can only do so much. It's like, help me, man. Like Kevin Hart on that comedy special. Help me, man. Help me. Just help me out. That's what they're saying to the offense right now. Help me, man. Because that's what they needed. They needed help, and they didn't get the help. They just didn't. They didn't get the help. When you look at that's the positive circle moment, 100% is their defense. Negative is their offense. If I'm Shia Wood, I'm like Leftwich, what the heck, man? Like, help me out. Call plays, dial it up for me, something. Because it's the truth. There was no offense whatsoever. That's the negative circle moment for them as well. Morton, who was a good quarterback all year, just wasn't dialed in. I don't think the offense was in sync. They just got out physicaled. I mean, overall, those are the negatives for the team. As I go to the stats here on my handy dandy notebook or my tablet to the corner here, I mean, look, 78 in rushing, that's a negative for me. I mean, if you look at third down, I mean, they were okay in third down. I mean, 6 for 16. I mean, it was half. But not only that, here's the big negative. Clicking of the pen again, big negative. 4 turnovers. They turned the ball over 4 times. You're not going to win that way. You're not. So that's a negative there. And then, like you said, time of possession. They just got beat in time of possession. They couldn't stop Oregon. And then at the end of the game, really couldn't stop Oregon. They made a few good stops on defense, and they did all they could, but they just got gassed. And I think that's the negatives there for Texas Tech. But the positives for me was that defense for this Red Raiders team. What do you think about Texas Tech? And how do you feel about Texas Tech, and how do you feel about them going into next year? Because I think you already know where I'm going to get at that. But how do you feel about them going into next year?
So I think this definitely sets up some dangerous narratives going forward for the Big 12, especially. I think with their showing being so subpar in every level. I think you had Morton with 2 turnovers, 6 of 16 on third down, 0 of 3 on fourth. I mean, they were getting that ball absolutely nowhere. It just wasn't going anywhere. And I think, unfortunately, being a Big 12 watcher with my Arizona Wildcats, bear down, you see especially watching those BYU Tech games, both of them, Morton had a slow start in both. It was just like this, and you knew, you know what, BYU's defense, it's a bend, don't break defense. You have some great areas of strength, especially within the front 7, but eventually Morton got it clicking with the receiving core, especially Virgil. I think you really saw that as being a strength of Tech, but if you looked closely, you saw that Texas Tech has had issues with the red zone. It really has been a problem all year. I brought it up on your last show, especially surrounding their champ game with BYU. I think that was something that I saw that I really thought, you know what, if they play a team with a really solid defensively minded coach, I think that is going to be exposed. And I think that's exactly what Joey McGuire saw from his offense at, facing Oregon. I think that going forward, you see, especially with the Big 12, Joey McGuire signing Brayton Sorsby to a 1-year, $5 million contract yesterday. I mean, I think that's a really quick move, and I think a lot of that is because he knows they're on the precipice of really running the Big 12. And he saw that quarterback play and knew, you know what, this is not a winning formula here. This is not something that can get you beyond the level of Oregon and some of these Big Ten teams. And I think that's why he made the move so quickly. As a matter of fact, I think, unfortunately, if their backup who had played earlier in the year, Will Hammond, was available for that game, I think they probably would have plugged him in the second half. He had a lot of success versus Utah and had some success versus their loss against ASU. I think this is something that Joey McGuire is looking at going forward and saying there needs to be a change.
100%, man. And the thing is, when I talk about this and I recap this game on Texas Tech's side, I am not knocking them. I'm just speaking the facts of what happened in this ball game. Man, they had a heck of a year. Their first ever Big 12 championship, 12-2. They're ruling the 2027 high school recruiting class right now. Yeah. They are literally, they probably could be dominating the transfer portal once again. I haven't checked the team rankings, but we're not doing a portal episode on Pigskin Frenzy. Spoiler alert, until after the national championship and after the season's over, because I like to gather all my thoughts for that, right? So we'll do that afterwards. But they're dominating, man. They're dominating. They're in recruiting, portal, everything. NIL money, they're dominating, man. So yep. Texas Tech's a great program. Joey McGuire's a heck of a coach. They got a great staff with Leftwich and Wood as the offensive and defensive coordinators, respectively. They're doing great, man. They're doing good things. And I'm hoping one day to have Joey McGuire on my show. He's a good, I heard he's a great dude, good coach, would love them all one day. But man, the sky's the limit for them, especially with Sorsby at quarterback now. I think that's a really good move that they made. We're going to see what happens with that in 2026. But, he can do it with his legs when need to be, and he has a good arm. So good on them. Good on them for getting a veteran quarterback like Brendan Sorsby at Texas Tech. So we'll see what happens in 2026. But that Orange Bowl was just not it for them. They may be back. Who knows? We'll see what happens next year. They may be back. 23-0 was the final score. Oregon defeated Texas Tech in the Orange Bowl. They're moving on to the Peach Bowl on Friday against the team we're talking about. Last game of the quarterfinal recaps, Indiana, Alabama. We're probably going to be a little bit quick on this one. I mean, and the thing is like, I honestly did not expect it to be like this. We live in a world where Indiana was the number one team in the playoff. Not only that, we live in a world where they are a dominating team, and they're playing Alabama. I picked Indiana to win. Shocker. I mean, especially in this day and age, Indiana over Bama. Like, are you insane? If you have told me that back in 2015, 10 years ago, or even 3 years ago, 2 years ago, you're like, dude, you're insane, right? You're so crazy for saying that. Well, guess what? Welcome to 2025 and now 2026 in college football. Indiana beats Alabama. Not only beats Alabama, they mollywopped Alabama 38-3 in this game. Shocked. I thought Bama was going to cover. I thought it was going to be a 3-point game, not a 38-3 game. Indiana gets the win. Fernando Mendoza proved why he won the Heisman Trophy. And by the way, and I'm going to sit here and say this, back in September, I said the Heisman hype could be real. I said that on X and Instagram. The prodigy of college football got this right, guys. I'm just going to pat myself on the back again with that because I called it. I said that the Heisman hype was real, and it was, man. He's a good quarterback. He just had to go to a different team. That's all it was. He had to go to a team where he needed some help, and he got that team where he has some help. Mendoza, 192 yards, 14 for 16 for 3 touchdowns. Becker, 51 yards, touchdown, 2 receptions. Black, 1 touchdown, 15 carries. They ran the ball well. I mean, let's look at their stats here. I mean, on the team stats, total yards, 407 total yards compared to their 193. Domination, dude. Positive circle moment for Indiana. 9 for 14. Third down efficiency, positive circle moment for Indiana. 22 first downs compared to their 11. Dude, they outrushed them 215 yards compared to their 23 rushing yards against Alabama. That's what's so crazy and mind-blowing is just the branding of this is insane. Positive circle moment again there. 1 for 10 on penalties. They only had 1 penalty, 0 turnovers, and then they outgained them in time of possession. Positive circle moments there. 12 yards per pass. I think yards per play were, if I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to think of yards per rush were 4.3. I don't know about their yards per play, but I'm going to tell you what, dude. I mean, they've got to be like average on 16 yards per play, I believe, if you can combine the rushing and the passing there. Dude, they look good. I mean, and not only good, they look elite. I don't know if anybody, I'm going to be leaning on this. Right now, Indiana is the best team in college football. Right now. I'm shocked about the way that they won. I'm going to go to you now. I mean, dude, they looked really good. And the reason why I didn't mention any negative circle moments is there's not a negative circle moment to mention in this game.
Yeah, I mean, wow. There's not much to say when it comes to Indiana at this point besides dominance. Right. This is what you saw from Saban at Alabama. This is what you've seen in the past from even, 2019 LSU looked quite the same way, just dominant on all cylinders. You don't really see a weakness with Indiana, and I think what's shocking to me especially is the way the defense played. I mean, wow, that is a Big Ten defense. That is a Big Ten defense in every facet of it. I think they have a very, very strong front seven. I think even their secondary was really, making people like Bernard and, Ryan Williams, where he's available these days, obscure. I think Ty Simpson, in terms of the old Darnold terminology, he looked like he was seeing ghosts. I mean, he really looked like there was just nothing they could do to break past that line. They were really trying to rush as much as they could. Nothing was working on that front. But I think ultimately what this shows is that people really got to stop underplaying Indiana, especially when it came to early season. People talking about, oh, they really don't schedule anyone in the preseason. Half of those teams, Old Dominion and Kennesaw State, ended up being 10-plus win programs, and that's pretty amazing to see that, how bad they beat them. I mean, you've got 7 9-plus win program wins overall for throughout the course of the season. I mean, beating Oregon, OSU, Alabama, Kennesaw State, Old Dominion, Illinois, and Iowa, both of which won their bowl games this weekend as well. I mean, that is a really strong schedule, especially looking back at it from now. But I think the thing going forward is, I mean, you've got Fernando Mendoza with more touchdowns than incompletions, had 2 incompletions on the day. I think you really looked at Coach Cignetti and saw poise and dominance. And I think that that's something, especially from a program like Indiana, who wasn't even remotely on anybody's radar 3 years ago. I think Cignetti really gets a lot of the credit for this. And I think going forward in this NIL era, you really see that coaching matters. Coaching matters more than it ever has. I think you've seen Saban's dominance in the past, but especially with the SEC and the Big Ten not really having quite the monopoly that they had on recruiting, you see that coaching actually matters even more. As a matter of fact, I think especially relating to Ole Miss, they could really use Kiffin right now. I think that having your top level coaches, I mean, you're either going to be facing Dan Lanning or Coach Cignetti. I think that is a really tough task for a new coach, especially Keith Golding.
Yeah. Indiana, man, looks really, really good. They're utilizing high school recruiting well now. They're starting to get into that. They're dominating the portal, right?
Yeah.
And especially early on, getting TCU quarterback, a transfer quarterback, Josh Hoover, now there in case Fernando Mendoza goes pro, which I highly expect Fernando Mendoza to probably go to the NFL.
Absolutely.
But we'll see what happens. Anything can happen. We're shocked. I mean, we can be shocked. Mendoza may come back. He's got 1 or 2 years of eligibility left, so we'll see what happens. But who knows, man? I mean, I think even with Hoover, they're going to be good. I posted that the other day. I said in a comment on X that Cignetti was in his bag, and he is in his bag right now. Would love to have Kirk Cignetti on the show one day, man. He's a good coach. Doesn't really smile about a lot, but that's okay. He just means business. That's all it is. He means business. So
unless he's around Dan Lanning.
Exactly. That and Dan Lanning, great combo. They mean business. They're not playing around, man. Indiana just dominated this game, 38-3. Let's go with Alabama really quick. I'm going to get your predictions for the Peach Bowl and then your national title predictions as well before we move on to the last 2 topics we're going to talk about, and then we'll wrap up. But man, Alabama. I'm just trying to gather my thoughts, right? With Alabama. Like, I'm trying to process what I can say about them. So positive to me, really, I think the positive was sounds bad saying this, Austin Mack getting in there. I mean, Austin Mack looked really poised to have not played much. I think that's a very good positive there. I mean, overall, there wasn't a lot. They really couldn't stop them defensively. They couldn't. They got outmanned up front on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, which, if we're saying that 2 years ago, and I was a future teller, a fortune teller, like a prophet or something, saying, hey, man, look, this is going to happen to y'all in 2 years. They would have laughed at my face. We're Alabama. We're not going to take this. They took it. And they got bullied, like just straight up bullied. There's nothing else to say. And I'm not trying to, and that's telling the truth. You got to tell the truth in college football. And that's what happened. Their leading rusher was Ty Simpson with 17 yards. Negative circle moment all around. They had only 1 turnover. Didn't really matter because Indiana just took the game. 25 minutes time of possession. 5.2 yards per pass, 23 yards rushing, 193 total yards. They were 3 for 11 on 3rd down. They only had 11 first downs. They were off the field more than were on the field. Bama just got blown out. That's all it was. They just got dominated. More negatives than positives. I think here's the 3 things, and I was going to elaborate on it more. I said that on Bedtime College Football Talk on X. Go and follow me at Pigskin _Frenzy. Man, I said 3 things they need to work on, and we're already doing a spring outlook on them. Number 1, I want to see if they can get the running game fixed. We need those running backs to be running a little bit more hard coming into 2026. Now, here's the caveat to that. Number 2, I said going into this season, and everybody makes wrong predictions because we don't know. It's just prediction. That's why it's called talking season. It's predictions. We say that during the off season before the season starts. I said that the offensive line was going to be one of the best groups in college football. Turned out to be not the case. So I want to see if their offensive line gets fixed. And I want to see if they can run block and pass block. Because let's be honest. Yes, they couldn't run the ball well. Part of that was the run blocking, and I think that they needed to run block a lot better. So that's number 2. Number 3, I think I want to see how tough they can be again. I want Bama to find themselves, and I mean find themselves toughness-wise, physically tough, mentally tough, just be tough again. Bama's a tough team usually, and that's what the program has been built off of from Nick Saban, passing it down technically to Kalen DeBoer, and it's not been tough. Where's the toughness? And that's what we want to see from Alabama. Trent, your thoughts on Alabama, and we'll wrap up on the Rose Bowl.
See, it's tough when talking about Alabama because you see this program that's gone from a program you feared, a name you heard, and you were like, they got this. They're going to win it every year. I mean, especially, in my childhood watching college football, that was pretty much the shoe-in winner. Even that big game with Tua to Calvin Ridley versus Georgia. You remember that in your mind. You remember all those years with Derrick Henry versus Clemson. You remember him winning with quarterbacks like Jay Coker, who are no longer even, relevant. You remember McElroy versus Florida, I believe. And you see these areas where it feels like it's a deeper seated issue than just recruiting. It feels like it's a deeper seated issue than just schematics. I think that ultimately DeBoer has not shown that he knows how to coach Alabama. I think he really has integral holes, especially when it comes to portal acquisitions. I think you see a lot of areas with key players being underutilized. I think a constant talk for them has been Ryan Williams, who I do expect to transfer at the end of this year. I see a lot of areas, especially around quarterbacking with Ty Simpson. I think, even Jalen Milroe really looked like about half the quarterback he was under Saban. And Saban took him, to the Rose Bowl versus Michigan. Like, he really figured out a way to utilize his skills, and I haven't seen that with DeBoer. I think DeBoer tends to really almost over scheme things. I think he's got some areas where, you have an electric offensive day versus Oklahoma, and that really made a statement win. But then you come into this game, and there's a lot of questionable decisions. I think Ty Simpson was really always a question mark. This whole year you saw there were a lot of areas where I don't know that the decision making's there. I don't know that he's really reading the field. I don't know that he's really utilizing second and third options in terms of wide receivers. I don't really know that he's always looking towards his tight ends, who tend to be a security blanket at times, especially in the Alabama program. I think that even to put in a player like Austin Mack when you've got a 5-star and Keelan Russell sitting on your bench, I think he early on in the season was really looked at as a possibility to overtake Simpson's job, and to not even give him a look, I think is questionable as well. You've got a lot of moving parts and shifting gears in this program right now, and unfortunately, I don't know that DeBoer is going to survive this. I think the fan base at large has already really started to criticize a lot of his key decisions and moves, and I think especially with a really weak SEC championship game and a really weak end of the season versus programs that in the past you would have really owned, this is a tough call, but I just think there are much longer-term problems for Alabama going forward. I think the run game is a short fix to a long-term problem.
Man, mic drop there. Man, we're going to have to figure out what's going on with Alabama in 2026 with their spring outlooks. And who knows? Maybe we'll get Trent Ritchie on to do some of these spring outlooks. Who knows, man? That may be fun. That may be an activity, man.
Absolutely.
Let me go on and say this, dude, because we got to do our 2 coaching carousel talks. I can't pick the games, but so you said Ole Miss to the national championship. Who do you have in the Peach Bowl, and then who do you have winning the national championship?
So I'd have Indiana coming out of the Peach Bowl. I think that Dante Moore is going to get a little bit exposed in a way that we're not, characteristic of seeing from him. I think I really desired more in some of these games. I think he kind of underwhelmed me versus Texas Tech, although I think he was solid. Even honestly versus James Madison, I was a little bit like, all right, you should really be pretty much scoring every drive. I think there were some key plays there where I was kind of like, that's a rough sight, especially versus a program like James Madison. I think this is going to be shown that, you know what, I think Dan Lanning and Curt Cignetti will have a rivalry going forward. I think they will, by and large, be in the Big Ten picture for the coming years, especially considering that there is no competition past Ohio State, Oregon, and Indiana in that conference right now that can really challenge them. However, I think Curt Cignetti is going to really separate himself as the best coach in college football in that one. Going forward to the national championship is where I think things are going to get really interesting, especially narratively looking back on college football in years in the future. I think that the real question coming out of this one, especially if what I believe to happen, which would be Indiana winning that, and I think probably with a big exclamation point and really making that claim to the national championship, is if only they had Lane Kiffin, if only you had the person who was really the engine behind this program at that game. I personally believe Lane Kiffin to be either the second or third best coach in college football. I think if you had him there, this would have really been a narrative of, okay, this is now a coaching-run league. This is now a coached-run NIL period. And I think that you see that even now with all the coaches you have available, but I think Ole Miss is going to really be talking about this for the next decade, going, we would have won that if we had Lane Kiffin. And I personally believe they probably would have had they had Lane Kiffin. But you know what? Curt Cignetti has really staked his claim in college football. He's really transformed the landscape, especially bringing up a program that nobody had in their hindsight, like Indiana. I think that this is a real achievement for him, and I believe they're going to win in a rather astounding fashion.
So Indiana rolls through Ole Miss.
You know what? I think Ole Miss will put up a fight. I think Ole Miss will make it closer, but I could see a world where Indiana wins by 10 to 13 points. I think this will be I think this will separate them as the best team. I think they'll have an undefeated record, which will be an even greater achievement. And I think 16-0. And I think Indiana will go down in a lot of people's memories as a very, very serious team, especially this year and even going forward.
Man, night drop. Good picks there. Good picks. Well, I can't predict anything until it is time to Thursday is when we predict, or at least for me, is when I predict it with our very special guest picker. We'll talk about that at the end. But, man, quarterfinal recaps, and that is moving on to semifinals. 4 teams left, and we're ready to rock and roll Thursday and Friday, both on ESPN. But before we conclude and wrap up everything, 2 things, because one, I forgot to talk about it, and I should have, and then the other happened yesterday. So let's discuss it and talk about it. Michigan hires Kyle Whittingham as their next head coach. Man, I love it. And I'm going to sit here and say that to the cows come home. I love it. I've always loved me some Kyle Whittingham. And that's another thing. That's another guy I want on my show. Another coach I want on my show is Kyle Whittingham. He's a phenomenal head coach. He was phenomenal at Utah. I think he's going to be great at Michigan. I mean, you're talking about how Michigan runs the football now. Wait until you see now that Jason Beck and company is there. You got Jason Beck on the offensive coordinator side of things. Defensive side of things, you got Jay Hill coming in from BYU. That's a great staff that they're putting together up in Michigan. Michigan's about to be a problem in 2026, I believe. I think that they may not be like, okay, national championship or anything like that, but they're going to be a serious problem for some teams they're facing on their schedule. They're going to run the ball well. They're going to be very tough and very physical. And the offense is going to be a little bit more dynamic than what Chip Lindsey brought to the table last year, I believe. So I'm going to start with you, or I'm going to end it with you, rather. What are your thoughts on Kyle Whittingham going to Michigan? And how do you think they're going to fare, right, going into 2026?
I think this is a good move for everyone. I think especially Kyle Whittingham, looking at his time in Utah, I think he had a lot of success there. He had a lot of great achievements for a program that really wasn't on anyone's radar before he got there. I do think, however, he capped out at Utah. I don't think there was any way he was ever going to really reach a Big 12 championship game. I think he was really behind in a lot of key recruiting areas, especially the quarterback position. I think there was something left to be desired there. But he is coming to a ready-made program, and a program that wants him terribly. I think after the way that, Sharon Moore exited, I think that has really left a bad taste in the mouth of the Michigan program, especially, your Michigan AD and your, Michigan, boosters. I think that there was a certain image, especially with Kyle Whittingham. But, they kept making jokes online that he's got a clean social media, that he's, he only follows his wife and kids. He's very, devoted to his craft and devoted what he does. And I think Michigan needs someone like that in the building. I think that's going to be a great match, especially for Bryce Underwood, who, Kyle Whittingham is known for really utilizing a dual threat quarterback, but he has never had a dual threat quarterback like this. I think he is going to allow for a lot of development with Bryce Underwood, even though I don't think that's a key area for Whittingham. Whittingham tends to lean on development with, the line play and the defense especially, which I think fits great with Michigan because that has been their identity in the past. That has been their key difference maker for a lot of their serious runs. I mean, even Harbaugh utilized a great defense and a really solid offensive line to help protect McCarthy. I think that this is a good match going forward, especially because he's very hard-nosed, he's very gritty, he's got a good sense of the game. I think he is someone who's going to really prioritize, beating your Ohio States and beating your Indianas. I think he's really going to prioritize that for the program. And I think, an 8-year deal with 75% of it guaranteed money. I mean, they really believe in this guy, and they're making it clear to everyone in college football that, Kyle Whittingham is coming, and he is ready to make a difference at Michigan.
Hey, man. Absolutely, dude. Well, sky's the limit, man. The sky is the limit for Michigan now. I think they're going to be a problem for a lot of people in 2026. Last but not least, and then we'll wrap up and conclude. Clemson, it wasn't needed a new offensive coordinator. They let go Garrett Riley, and now they have found their next, or I guess their old offensive coordinator, if that makes sense. They're returning. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Clemson head coach Dabo Swinney has hired Chad Morris as their next and back to being offensive coordinator for the Clemson Tigers. He was the coordinator from 2011 to 14, so they're kind of going back to the future a little bit, right, with their offensive coordinator and their offensive style here. So how do you think this move is going to be in your eyes?
I think it's somewhat of a lateral move, even though, I get that from a Clemson fan's perspective. I know many of them. Garrett Riley has been a problem all year. This is nothing new, no surprise. Even in that last game, you return Klubnik versus, a really injured Penn State team, and you put up 10 points. I mean, that is completely inexcusable and unacceptable. And I think that, bringing in a new voice into that locker room is something that I would have prioritized, especially if I'm Dabo Swinney. But I think an even bigger priority going forward that can really change the landscape for them, especially applying to Morris, is they really need to utilize the transfer portal. I think at this point, they've really been quiet on that front. They've really tried to, differentiate themselves as we're the school where we cultivate talent. We really start from the bottom and work our way up. We start with our freshmen, embed them into the system, get them ready early. And you know what? They've had a lot of success in that area. I think you've got, your Hunter Renfro's, your Trevor Lawrence. Like, you've got a lot of great success stories on that front, especially even with your wide receivers. You got T. Higgins, great names, DeAndre Hopkins. But I think even then, there's really something to be said about utilizing the transfer portal, especially when you could even have Chandler Morris, Chad Morris's son on the team. I mean, he's applying for his 7th year of eligibility due to his 2022 injury. I think that there are areas I see where if you only utilize the transfer portal, you could have something really serious. And I think, unfortunately, Clemson has gone from, we're the smart kid South school. We're really different. We're the ones that hung in there with Bama. We were even there for that LSU national championship, as bad of a showing as that was for them. They've really been relevant to college football, even last year making the playoffs by the hair of their chin, barely even getting in there. But, you can definitely tell that college football has out-evolved Clemson right now. They're really missing key areas. I think especially when it comes to their line play. I think that's a big deal for them, and I could see how the transfer portal could really help boost them back up to the status that they once were, and I hope that they utilize that because unfortunately I think if they don't, that the college football landscape is going to outgrow Dabo Swinney at some point, which is unfortunate, but I think if he were to utilize that transfer portal, he could really get a leg up and put Clemson back on the map.
Hey, absolutely, man. I kind of agree with that. I think that's what's the concern for me is this is I'm not against the Chad Morris hire at all. Anything that's going to fix the offense, fix it, right? 100%. I'm not in disagreement with that. The move's the move. I think the problem to me is that you had a team this year that was number 4 in the nation that was picked by many outlets to win the national championship, and it didn't happen. You had the most returning production in college football. Now you're losing all that talent.
Yep.
And now you're having a whole kind of a different team coming in. I mean, you may retain some of it, maybe, but you're losing a whole crop of that talent, including a quarterback in Kate Klubnik. You need a quarterback. I'm pretty sure it's either going to be maybe Chandler Morris, maybe, or Christopher Vizzini, I think, is the next guy in line for that job, which Vizzina is a good quarterback I've seen him play. He's not bad. He's a good quarterback. I think my problem, and this is just my Joel Norris, prodigy of college football, Joel Norris, honest thoughts. How do we expect it to be better than it was last year? Because he had a lot of talent last year. Now you're losing a lot of talent. On paper, you're looking, how is that going to be? How's it even be better? Especially if you don't utilize what you're supposed to be utilizing nowadays. One person said on social media, I can't remember who it was. I think it was JD Pikel from On3 Sports. I think it's what he said. Shout out to him. He's awesome. Love to have him on the show one day, like I said about everybody else. The transfer portal's not optional. It's not.
Nope.
Eventually, you are going to have to utilize it. I don't know how. I mean, you don't have to, stack your whole team with transfers. I'm not saying that. Balance it out with both. But you're going to have to utilize it some. Because if you don't, to fulfill a certain need, then what are you going to do? It's just the way college ball works in 2026. So you got to utilize what works in 2026, not what works in 2015 and 16. You know what I mean? And back in the day, right? So that's my honest thoughts. Who we're going to get with Clemson? I may do another spring outlook on Clemson. Who are we going to get? Because now it's starting to concern me a little bit. Like, who are we going to get with Clemson? That's my overall thoughts on everything. I'm not against the hire, but like I said, but who's going to show up at Clemson? Like, what are we going to get? Because that's just the biggest unknown. To me, it's one of the biggest unknown teams because they may surprise a lot of people and rise from the ashes. But yet again, on paper, when you lost all that talent that was projected to get you a national title, now you're looking at it and you're like, what are they going to do? You know what I mean? So
yeah,
we'll see what happens with Clemson, man. But last question before we just pop off and just hop off of here and conclude. Who was the biggest surprise in the playoff? And who was the overwhelming and underwhelming? That's what makes sense, I guess. It makes it better since I say it that way or ask it that way. So overwhelming or underwhelming? So who exceeded their expectations, surprised you the most in that regard? And who let you down the most in the playoff?
So I think it's pretty clear to me that in terms of underwhelming, I think definitely you got to pin Texas Tech. I think that one was so unexpected from the eyes of many Big 12 fans. And I think relating to that narrative going forward, especially losing key coaches like Kyle Whittingham in a coach-heavy era, I think the Big 12's in a lot of trouble going forward. I think there is they were carrying themselves with a certain weight that, we are the third best conference. We want to be up there with the Big Ten and the SEC. We're really getting the recruiting that matters. And I think they are in many aspects, especially with the transfer portal and the way that Texas Tech has utilized that. But I think that these kind of losses will add up. you already had a year in last year where you had two ACC teams, one Big 12 team, and there was never a question about that. And even this year, you have BYU getting really, really beat up twice by Texas Tech, and there wasn't a question about that this year either. I think going forward, your question as a Big 12 fan becomes, when are we going to eclipse that one spot? When are we going to actually make a difference and start getting multiple spots in the playoff? Because if your only representation every year is going to be the one Texas Tech team, and they're going to show up like this, it's really quite embarrassing for the conference as a whole. On the inverse, I think in terms of overwhelming, you got to look at Miami. I mean, that was a very, very weak conference to the point where your conference winner wasn't even eligible for the playoffs. It wasn't even thought about. And over teams like, Tulane, who technically took the spot of that fourth conference winner, and James Madison, I mean, that's really an unbelievable slight against the ACC. But you know what? I had a feeling the committee was going to put in Miami. There was a lot of buzz going around about them versus Notre Dame, how head-to-head matchups have to matter, and I think that worked out great for Miami. I think Notre Dame has had a less than desirable response, but you know what? I think that Miami has really proven that the ACC is not dead on arrival. The ACC really has a lot of talent that people aren't quite ready to handle, especially from the Big Ten and the SEC. I think that you've really put the ACC back firmly in the conversation of, this is a power forward. I get that our winner wasn't great. We had some weird matchups this year. I think especially with SMU losing to Cal, that was a big one for them at the end of the year. That basically rules out a clear-cut conference winner that belongs in the playoffs. And I think that Miami represented them well this year, and the ACC should be incredibly happy with the committee's decision to include Miami and incredibly happy with themselves for really sticking up for Miami and really, putting it to Notre Dame that, no, Miami beat you head to head. They belong there. And honestly, I think going forward, this is really going to change the landscape for Notre Dame, because I believe at some point they are going to have to join a conference.
Mic drop. And by the way, keep an eye out on Wake Forest, because that's a good football team right there. Wake Forest for next in 2026. I said it with Savannah too, Jay. Go back and listen to that episode when we're talking about our bowl games. That's a good team right there, Wake Forest is. So let's watch out for Wake Forest. They won and Jake Dickert's first season won 9 games. So Trent Ritchie, ladies and gentlemen, our correspondent for Pigskin Frenzy. Round of applause. We will have him back on the show very soon. Try to get him on after we do our Frenzy games of the 2025 season, and we'll try to do some spring outlooks with him most likely, and we'll try to get him back on as soon as we can. Guys, that's all we got for today. Thank you for joining us for Pigskin Frenzy. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like each episode, leave comments down below. Spotify, Podbean, and Apple, all you got to do is just share around with others and follow on there as well. X on Instagram is at Pigskin_Frenzy. Follow, like the page, each page there. And then the website's www.pigskinfrenzy.weebly.com. Beautiful Tuesday afternoon. Go enjoy it while listening to this episode. Man, we will be back on Thursday with the founder and creator of Back Then Sports, Cruz Oxenrider. He will join us and he will preview and predict the College Football Playoff semifinal. We're going to talk about both games with Ole Miss versus Miami in the Fiesta Bowl and Indiana and Oregon in the Peach Bowl. And then we're going to discuss his, life outside of sports media. We're going to talk about how he started in sports media and discuss his career and how he created Back Then Sports on the socials. That is Cruz Oxenrider on Pigskin Frenzy coming up on Thursday as our semifinal guest picker. Man, we are so thankful to be doing this show. We could not do this without you guys each and every week tuning in and listening on audio and video. 61,000 channel views, about to be 6,400 listeners on all audio platforms. We could not do this show without you guys. We could not do this show without our Lord and Savior Jesus. We give him all the praise and we glorify him to be in, just doing Pigskin Frenzy and in sports media. Without him, we would not be doing this. So we give him all the glory and all the praise. Guys, until Thursday, I'm Joel Norris. That's Trent Ritchie. We're signing off. We'll see you then. For everybody out there, we're praying for you all. We love you all. As always, stay the course.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.